top and full of running, victory the brave. Blue, white and silver flying, strike like a flash of lightning, revved up and full of fighting, victory the brave. And in the heat of battle, stand up and show no fear, proud and courageous, marching on to victory. Oh, Melbourne, hear the sound of drumming, must be the victory coming, pumped up and full of running, victory the brave. We are the pride of Brisbane town, we will roll, blue and gold. We will always fight for victory, like Fitzroy and Bears of old. All for one and one for all, we will answer to the call. Go Lions, Brisbane Lions, we'll kick the winning score. You'll hear our mighty roar, you'll hear our mighty roar.
Welcome back to 94.1 FM 3WBC. You're with Neil Butler, and I'm about to introduce my mystery guest. The two songs we just played should have given you a clue if you know your music trivia, but you may not. The man who's sitting opposite me wrote the words to both songs. He's not claiming credit for the music itself, but for the words. It is Mr. Jim Keays, mainstay of the Masters Apprentices. Welcome, Jim.
Great to be here, Neil.
And it's great to have you here. Now, you did write the words to those songs?
I did, and my wife actually was a Brisbane Bears fan when I were the Bears, and she was one of only about 5 Bears members in Melbourne in those early
She
days.
would have known the rest of them.
Yeah, and I used to go, they'd always invite her along to their functions, and the functions would be about 7 people, you know, and I'd go along with her, even though I'm not a Brisbane Bears back then. Fan, but I'd go along with her, you know, just to accompany her. And the guy there said, "Look, we're changing from the Bears into the Lions. You know, we're taking over the Fitzroy Football Club. And you're a songwriter. Would you have a go at writing a new song for us?" And I was, well, okay. So I did, and they loved it and accepted it, and now it is the Brisbane Lions official football club song.
And I have sung it on more than one occasion.
You are a Brisbane Lion.
I'm an old Fitzroy supporter.
Yeah,
good.
And
absolutely love it.
You've embraced the new club.
Very much so.
That's great. And as far as the Melbourne Victory is concerned, Glenn Wheatley, who was in the Masters Apprentices, of course, was one of the inaugural board members of the Melbourne Victory in the early stages when they were setting it up, and he's from Brisbane, of course.
Yes,
Glenn originally, and he is he knew I'd written the Brisbane Lions football clubs, so he said, "Look, I've got the Victory thing going. How about giving him the Victory club song a try?"
Oh, fair enough.
So I did, and they loved it too. So, and me being Scottish, I thought I'll use the old Scotland the Brave and turn that into a song, and it actually sounds really good in a club song.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a rousing anthem anyway.
It is, and it just worked. It worked a treat actually, and I sent it in, and they went, "Oh, this is great!" And of course, Ernie Merrick, their coach, is Scottish. So
it does come across a bit in the interviews, doesn't it?
Yeah, he does. And so when Scotland the Brave came along, obviously he went, "Oh, this is good."
I'll be happy with that. Yeah.
So that's how it came about.
Oh,
Neil.
wow. Yeah. It's because I had not heard the Victory song. I'm not a great soccer fan.
I'm not either, really.
Yeah.
But because of the Glen connection. But yeah. I'm not.
It just sounds really, really good.
It does.
Yeah, so well done on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Picking up on the fact that you're a Glaswegian, you were born over in Scotland, as you said. How did you get here? I mean, why Australia?
In about 1950, I think 51, we migrated.
25 years before you were born, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Our family immigrated to Australia and to Adelaide in particular, which a lot of British migrants did do.
Yep.
And so from 1951 onwards, all my schooling was done in Australia. In
Norwood High School, according to my research.
And Burnside Primary before that.
Yep.
So I grew up in Adelaide and lived there until about 1966.
Okay.
Which is when, of course, the Masters formed and eventually came to Melbourne.
Now, you're part of a band called the Mustangs originally, as I
We
understand.
were.
Yep.
The same thing, same band, really.
Same band, just new name.
New name. The Mustangs were going before I joined. They were an instrumental band,
Yep.
as a lot of before the Beatles, in the pre-Beatles era. There were a lot of instrumental bands like Johnny and the Hurricanes
Yep.
and Dwayne Eddy and all those
The
people.
Atlantics.
Yeah.
Said he'd throw one Eddie knows.
The surf bands and all
Yeah.
that, yeah. And of course the Ventures and the Shadows.
Yes.
You know?
Yep.
So they were that sort of band.
Yeah.
And but they were dragged kicking and screaming into the new era, which was the Beatles era.
Yep.
And they obviously needed a singer, and because that's what the new thing was.
Yeah, sure.
And so they advertised for a singer, and I applied, and I joined them. But when I joined at first, they would do all instrumental songs, and I'd come up and do a couple at the end with vocals. You know?
Okay, yeah.
Until it gradually I took over, you know, and they embraced the new era because they dressed like they had the rocker haircuts with
Yep.
the hair oil in there, and you know the Elvis look.
Yep.
And I came along with the new Beatles sort of haircut and stuff, and sort of I guess changed them into a new age band
With a new name.
with a new name. I insisted. I said you can't be the Mustangs anymore. You know, let's
What's
get
the
a
Box Hill Football Club, the Mustangs?
yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
And so they did, and they were glad to change. They wanted to change.
Yep.
It wasn't they weren't being forced to change. It was obvious there was a new era, and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all that. So you know, we changed our whole image, and it worked.
And the reason for the name?
Yeah, well, it was Mick Bauer, our original guitarist, that came up with the name. We started to listen to old blues records.
Yep.
Because that's what a lot of those English bands were
Sure,
doing.
yeah.
You know, the Stones and that were harking back into the old blues guys and taking their songs and revamping them into a modern style.
Yep.
And so we did the same thing. We'd listen to Robert Johnson and Leadbelly and you know, of course, Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and all those people. And to us, they were the masters.
Yep.
And we considered ourselves apprentice to them.
Yep.
So that's how we were the Masters Apprentices. So it's a name that actually means something.
Absolutely,
and, you know,
yeah.
And rather than just you know, like the Twilights, which
Yeah.
doesn't really mean anything.
Sure.
It had a meaning behind it, and I thought it was quite an inspired name in the end.
Absolutely. Without an apostrophe.
Without an apostrophe. I guess that was just a grammatical error at first, but then it became the thing. Don't put the apostrophe in, you know.
Well, when I was doing the research and I was putting stuff on the web to say that you were going to be here,
Yeah.
I said to myself, I better make sure I get the apostrophe in the right place.
Yeah, that's
got
right.
your CD cover out, there's no apostrophe. Hang on.
That's
So I went and
right.
checked, sure enough,
But
there's none.
sometimes they put it in, and some you know, people decide that they better make it grammatically correct, so
Yes.
they put it in, and
Yeah.
and fair enough, I suppose. But yeah, it's not meant to have one. Yeah.
So it would be after the S, I think, if we were being
it
technically
would
correct.
be because there were several masters.
That's it, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. So you ran, I think, third to the Twilights in the Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds. What a great name that is.
The Hoadley's Battle of the
What, you win a
Sounds.
bag of Violet Crumbles or something if you won it?
Yeah, you did. I sort of decry those X Factor and Australian Idol, but really that was a similar thing in its day. Really,
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
But it wasn't it was for bands rather than solo artists.
And
But
presumably the people who were judges knew what they were talking
they
about.
did.
He said
That's
through gritted teeth.
That's true, and it was you know, credible musically rather than taking somebody off the street who'd never really done much
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just sang in their bedroom. These were all bands that actually were professional bands. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was a different thing, really. But
Yeah. So you decided that Adelaide wasn't big enough for you, or was it the fact that there seemed to be 7,000 million good bands coming out of Adelaide?
There was in the 60s,
There was,
and
wasn't
that
there?
was due to the fact, like I harked back to earlier when we emigrated to Adelaide, as lots of British migrants did.
Yep.
Adelaide was sort of the place in the 60s and 50s
Yep.
where British migrants went to, and,
Yep.
so when in the dawning of the British invasion period with the Beatles and Stones, there were all these kids there that were British kids and
Yep.
were coming out to Australia and had seen the Who Who and the Kinks and all those bands only weeks before, and
wanted to be them.
Coming along to the gigs and sort of giving us ideas. And all that sort of thing. So it was a big British influence in Adelaide, and that's why a lot of the bands came. The Zoot, the Twilights, it goes on, and then later on the Angels and Cold Chisel, and they were all British. And if you look at Jimmy Barnes is Scottish, and Doc Neeson's Irish, and they were all and Glenn Shorrock's English, and so they were all British migrants really out of those bands that came out of Adelaide.
Well, one of the people who sat in exactly that chair not that long ago was Graham Goble from LRB in Mississippi. Also coming out of Adelaide. And he was saying that you cannot have a sensible, successful musical act without an English singer. British singer, in fact.
British singer, yeah. Well, there's heaps of them. I mean, Colin Hay, John Paul Young. Look, the list goes on and on and on.
Well, the two that he most obviously worked with were Shorrock and Farnham. Both of whom were born over there.
Absolutely.
So you're part of a good group.
Yeah, I guess so. And I don't know why that is or why it should be, but I remember thinking sometime in the 70s and looking back at the 60s and thinking just about every 60s band had a British singer. There was hardly any that had an Australian singer.
And Graham's belief is you couldn't be successful without one. So there you go. So, hi Graham, if you're listening, by the way.
To answer your question, Adelaide became too small for us, and and not so much that. It's just that we knew that if we wanted to make it nationally, we had to go to Melbourne, because in Melbourne, it's where the TV shows were. Go Set magazine was out of there. The record companies were there. The whole infrastructure that there was at that stage, which wasn't that much anyway.
Yes, both buildings
was based in Melbourne. And so you had to go there. And when we arrived, we realised that bands from Sydney, Perth, Brisbane and Adelaide had all converged there anyway. So, it wasn't a matter of that we were pushed out of Adelaide. We wanted to go because we knew we had to.
Yeah, that's where the work was. Well, soon after you got to Melbourne, you had your first chart success with a song called Undecided, which I believe was a Mick Bauer song.
It was a Mick Bauer song, and we actually did record that in Adelaide. Before we left. It was what happened. Well, there's various stories about how we were discovered, so to speak, and that what my take on it is that Bobby and Laurie, who were a duo at the time,
yes, Bobby Bright and Laurie Allen,
came over to Adelaide to do some gigs. And they saw us at the Beat Basement, a place called the Beat Basement where we used to play, and went back to Melbourne and alerted their record company that there was this band in Adelaide called the Masters Apprentices that were really hot and you should get onto them. And they did. They wrote us a letter and said, send us a demo. So we recorded these tracks, of which Undecided was one, and sent them over, and they loved it. And that's how it all started. I mean, when you ask people, other guys in the band, what the story was, you get 5 different stories, So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, you'd be pleased to know that's backed up by the only reputable journal, and that is Wikipedia. That's exactly the story on Wikipedia.
They say that too, but then Wikipedia have probably just got that from me anyway.
Oh, probably, yeah. That's it, yeah. Well, we're going to hear that song, which got to number 3 in 1967, I think it would have been.
Early 60. It was released in late 66, but it charted in 67.
It charted at number 3. The voice you're hearing, apart from my dull tones, are the dulcet tones of Mr. Jim Keays, who obviously is synonymous with Masters Apprentices, who are going to perform for us right here, well, not right here and now, 40 years ago, in fact, with Undecided. You're listening to 94.1 FM, 3WBC.
Hi, this is Jim Keays from the Masters Apprentices, and you're listening to Radio Gaga on 94.1 FM, 3WBC.
And that was Living in a Child's Dream by the Masters Apprentices, and before that, Undecided out of 1967, also by the Masters. Well, I'm fortunate to have in the studio with me Jim Keays, mainstay of the Masters Apprentices. Jim, that song, Living in a Child's Dream, it was Australian Song of the Year in 1967, according to the Go Set readers. It must have been a big hit for you.
It was. Actually, I think it was in a magazine called Everybody's. That was actually voted that. And I think Go Set picked that up from there. But, yes, it was Australian Song of the Year.
Yes,
in 67. it came in before the Summer of Love,
Yep.
As they call it,
Yes.
which was the psychedelic, the birth of the psychedelic period, the acid period, and everybody thought that was an acid song, because of the lyric,
Yeah.
and the windows of the greenhouse, they're painted yellow like the doors, and it was all very psychedelic.
Yeah.
But it actually wasn't written to be that.
Okay.
It was actually written in all innocence. Mick Bauer had never touched any. He'd never even had a drink. He was a very straight guy.
Yeah.
And so it was not a psychedelic record
Intent, yeah.
or attempt to be that.
Yep.
But everybody's lumped it in with that psychedelic period, and they all think it's an acid song. So we'll let them think that.
Well, we've got a great show here on 94.1 FM, which you would have heard yesterday, Saturday afternoons every week, 5 till 7. We have a show called Winds of Change, Psychedelia and Beyond, hosted by a bloke called Gavin Carroll, who you might have met around the traps.
I have.
Gav's a bass player, and he plays. He does the show every Saturday afternoon between 5 and 7 on 94.1. And I know he's played Living in a Child's Dream as part of Psychedelia.
As part of the Psychedelia,
So we will be having words, me and Gav and I, after this program. Don't you worry about that.
That's right. But one that was meant to be a psychedelic was, of course, Elevator Driver, which we'll talk about later
Sure,
on. But Living in a Child's Dream was a big hit for us, and I think it was a great move on our behalf, because we'd had Undecided as the first single, and then we had Buried and Dead as the second single, which was very similar to Undecided. It was raw garage punk.
Yep.
And then Child's Dream was totally removed from that. It was nothing like that. It was like chalk and cheese from those first two. And that's what the good thing was. If we'd have continued on the same vein, it would have just been another song. But because we went so different, it sort of, people went, oh, there's another string to their bow. They can do something else. They're not just a garage sort of punk band, that they're actually a band with some sort of musical credibility. So that Living in a Child's Dream was a pivotal point in turning our image around a little bit and proving that we could do something else.
And I'm really pleased you said that about Buried and Dead, because I was going to play that back to back with Undecided, and I thought, they're almost the same song. Not, but I mean, but
but they are.
And I'm glad I've done the research. I'm impressed.
You have. I'm impressed.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad you are. Now, in 1968, you started to get together the group of people who were, I guess, everyone calls the classic Masters lineup, and that was yourself, Glenn Wheatley, Doug Ford, and Colin Burgess.
That's right.
How did you all get together, you guys?
Well, what happened was that the early guys, the original Adelaide band, one by one, they, for various reasons, couldn't cope with the I guess the fame and the lifestyle more than anything.
Yeah.
Because we were all of a sudden we were catapulted into the national scene. We had girls screaming, ripping our clothes off, and on stage, and it was bedlam and mayhem. It really was. I mean, back in those days, it was like Beatlemania.
You see the footage,
Yeah, and those early guys sort of couldn't really. Mick Bauer particularly couldn't cope with it. He had a nervous breakdown, actually.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason being is because he was a very you'd almost call him anal. He was everything had to be right and perfect, and his suitcase was all packed and the t-shirts all folded neatly and all that sort of stuff. And he just wasn't suited to a gypsy life on the road with no fixed address and just continual mayhem. So. He left because of that, and then another one, Rick Morrison, our original guitarist, he left because he had a health issue. He only had one lung, and in these smoky venues, he collapsed one night and was rushed to hospital. And they said, "Look, if you continue on, you'll die."
Yeah.
So he had to go, and then just so for various medical reasons, people, the original lineup, all one by one dropped away, and I must be like a rhinoceros. I must have a thick skin because I could handle it. For some reason I thrived on it.
Yeah.
And so I gradually recruited other members as the other old ones left.
Yep.
And so we eventually ended up with, as you say, the classic lineup that with Colin, Doug, Glenn, and me, which stayed once we formed in 68, we stayed together all the way through from then till the end, because they were all hardened players, these guys, so they weren't going to have nervous breakdowns and not be able to cope.
So in the event that you were to be at, say, a Rock of Ages, are they the same guys that come together still?
No.
Okay.
No. Glenn Glenn obviously he hasn't played for many years.
Okay.
Because he's into the management role now with Farnham and things, and so he's not match fit, if you like. and Doug basically is retired. He lives up in Queensland now,
Okay.
and he's just playing in a little band there, and that's all he wants to do now.
Yep.
He doesn't want any sort of big sort of shows or anything like that. He just wants to be in the background, really.
Yep.
And Colin, the drummer, he had a very bad car accident a few years ago,
Okay.
which almost killed him.
Okay.
And he recovered from that, and he's okay, but he hasn't got the stamina anymore. It was a very serious accident, and crushed his whole chest in.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he's got a pacemaker in his heart, and like half of his intestines are gone.
Yeah, so,
and,
impractical.
so he couldn't really do a full set of powerhouse music.
Yep.
So it's me now.
Okay.
Basically it's me, and I've just got to gather around me people that other players that can play the stuff. But I don't do that many Masters Apprentices gigs. They don't come up very often.
Yeah, the special event sort of stuff.
Special events sort of stuff, and that's all I do, because I don't want to thrash the name around doing pubs or anything like that with the band.
No.
I mean, we've got a good name, and I just like to keep it that way, and just use it for big events. Like the Rock of Ages concert was good at the Crown Casino there. It was a big show, things like that. We did the Clipsal 500 race after race thing in Adelaide, where there was 20 or 30,000 people there.
Sure.
Those sort of shows I'll do, but and I've done a couple of other. I did the Zoo, which was fun. I was asked to do the Zoo, and those Zoo Twilight shows are actually quite fun.
Okay.
So I did one of those, but not very many.
Yeah. I actually saw two bands reform last week. Ariel
Yeah.
and Sherbet,
Right.
albeit with one or two members missing.
Yeah.
Harvey James had a benefit concert.
He did.
What a superb night out for $35. It was just fantastic. Even
I heard about it. I didn't go, but I heard about it. Harvey's not well.
He's very unwell, but I got to tell you what, for a bloke who's crook, he got on stage at 8 o'clock, and I had to go at 4:45 because I was working the next morning, and he was still going.
Still going. Good on him.
So he was going, and it was who's who. Well, minus yourself, of course.
Yeah.
Now, we alluded to Elevator Driver, which charted during 1968. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, look, that was in the period where we're just talking about that all these guys, the early Masters Apprentices guys, all left, and I was in the middle of recruiting new people, and I was looking around for players who were hardened musicians who weren't going to flake, and so I got Doug Ford he was in a real early band called the Missing Links, which are a great band, and then Running, Jumping, Standing Still later on after that.
It's a great name.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. And so they were a tough rock and roll band, no doubt about it. And they'd been around quite a long time, so I knew Doug wasn't going to drop out. And Glenn had been in Bay City Union, which is a band out of Brisbane, which had Matt Taylor that later became Chain. Actually, Phil Manning.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Phil was there the other night.
Yep. And and Colin had been in bands in Sydney with his brother for years, since a band called The Throb were early on.
Okay, yep.
And so they were all hardened musicians, so I knew they weren't gonna flake. But Elevator Driver was in that period where I was changing over to these new guys.
Yep.
And we'd lost Mick Bauer, our songwriter, who'd written all the early hits.
Yep.
And so we didn't have a song, and the record company was screaming out for the next single. And I hadn't established any sort of songwriting of my own at that stage, and Mick had left. So I thought, what are we going to do for a song? So I knew that Brian Cadd had been writing songs for people. He wrote a couple of songs for Johnny Farnham in the early days, and
Robin
like
Jolly with Marshall's Portable Music
that's
Machine.
Right, all that stuff. And so I went to Brian and I said, look, could you come up with a song for us, And well, I didn't. Actually, our manager at the time did.
Yep.
And he approached Brian and said, can you come up with a song for the Masters? And I got this cassette of a song called Silver People. And so I got it, and we thought, yeah, it's pretty good, but we took it into the studio and sort of revamped it, made it into our own, and changed the name from Silver People to Elevator Driver, and changed it around a bit and put our stamp on it and put it out. So it's the only it's the only song in our whole career that we went outside of the band to get.
Yeah.
And that was only because we hadn't established a songwriting team, a new songwriting team at that stage. But then as soon as Doug joined, I got together with Doug and we started writing our own stuff. And from then on, it was all Ford Keays compositions then on in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I looked at the album I've got here, which you've got to get hold of, folks. It's called The Choicest Cuts.
It's over there.
We'll get it during the next song. But it's really funny. It's got Bower, 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 CAD, Ford Keays, Ford Keays, Ford Keays, Ford Keays, which to me sounds like how you start a car, the Ford Keays, isn't it? Well, we're going to hear the song Elevator Driver. Came out in 1968 and reached number 35 nationally, according to my famous red book.
I thought it did better than that, but maybe it didn't.
Well, it's interesting because it gets, the way that the book operates is where was its highest peak when you look at the sales nationally at a given time.
I see, because in those days, the songs weren't always a hit in every state at the same time.
Correct.
And in fact, Undecided was a hit in Adelaide, and then months later a hit in Melbourne, and then months later a hit in Sydney. And so where did it get to nationally? You can't really gauge it.
Yeah, because at one particular point in time, it got to wherever.
Yeah.
Ross Stevenson, who you'd be familiar with from 3AW, I interviewed Ross a couple of weeks ago on a co-hosting role I had on the station, and he was part of the backing group sounds impressive. He's part of the St Paul's Cathedral Choir when he was at Trinity for Colin Hewitt's Day by Day.
Yeah.
And he's been telling the world he's had a number one hit.
Yeah.
Now, if you go by that red book, he got to number 6.
Yeah, that's right.
But it got to number 1 in every state. So he's going, I'm hanging my hat on that one.
Well, that's the same with Elevator Driver because it did chart pretty well.
Yeah, it did.
But because it was haphazard charting, you can't really gauge where it is nationally. But
correct.
Yeah.
So here's Elevator Driver, Masters Apprentices. You're listening to 94.1 FM 3WBC. We're back here on 94.1 FM 3WBC. You're listening to Radio Gaga with Neil Butler and my guest, Jim Keays from the Master Apprentices.
Lovely to be here, Neil.
We're having good fun here.
We are.
And some great music.
Oh, of course.
Now, for those who have been holding on to their pen, it is called Fully Qualified.
Fully Qualified, the
Choicest Cuts, which is a play on the fact that you are Masters Apprentices, you're now fully qualified.
Yep.
And an album early doors called The Choice Cuts.
That's exactly right.
Which is, in fact, now The Choicest Cuts.
The Choicest Cuts, because it's the best of.
Yeah, absolutely. And where's it available?
Everywhere. All the good and bad record stores.
Is that right? Because I got mine at a gig recently at the Hotel Shopping Town, which we'll talk a bit about later on.
All right, yes, of course.
So it's a fantastic album, I've got to say.
It is, and been remastered too for the very first time. We found the old tapes over in England for the Choice Cuts album that we recorded at Abbey Road.
Sure.
We found the old multi-track tapes that we thought had been lost for years, and it's all been remastered, so it's never sounded so good.
It sounds absolutely fantastic, and I'm not saying that because he's sitting within arm's reach and he's from Glasgow.
No, but it's true. It's a fact.
Yeah, it is a fantastic album. So, lovely segue. I've got the notes in front of me, and you haven't. You know what I'm going to talk about next. You went to the UK 6 weeks on a boat. Fortunately, not 6 months on a leaky one.
Yeah.
It must have been mayhem in 1970 in that part of the world.
It was. Well, we'd done everything we could in Australia with that classic lineup you're talking about, the Ford, Keays, Burgess, Wheatley lineup. We'd gone around Australia 100 times. We'd done every gig there was. We'd done every TV show. In fact, we used to ring up Uptight and Happening 70 and those shows and say, please don't have us on, which you'd never do now. I mean, you'd be screaming to get on TV.
Any publicity.
We would ring up and say, don't have us on, we're on too much, we're overexposed. And we were, you know, we were on every weekend, and we were just everywhere. We were on the cover of Go Set magazine, we were, you know, and so the only thing that could happen from there was go down, you know, because we were up there, but if you just kept going, you would just gradually go down.
Yep.
So we had to leave. We had to get out. It was the only escape for us. We had to get away, and luckily we did. And we went to England, and it was probably the best thing we ever did. I mean, really. But it was mayhem here before we left, because we were in 1970. We were voted Australia's most popular band.
Yep. Okay.
And we left right at our very peak, and that's probably the best thing we could have done.
Yeah.
Because it was only downhill from there back in Australia. So we left and went over to England, and it was great because nobody knew us there, and we could walk down the street and nobody would know us.
Yeah.
That was like heaven, because you couldn't do that in Australia. We'd get mobbed.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so we were anonymous over there, so we could do whatever we like. We'd go to gigs and look at other bands and learn a lot. We learned a lot when like we were giant sponges. We absorbed all the musical influences that were happening in England at that time, which was unbelievable, because 1970s, but the Beatles were still together and Jimi Hendrix was there, and everything was London was absolutely buzzing. And we arrived right at the peak of it. It was just fantastic.
And of the influences you ran into in those, who were some of the big ones that you could name that you reckon had an influence on you?
There was so much variety there. I mean, we were going and seeing Jethro Tull and Yes and bands like that. We were in the studio. John Lennon was in the studio next door to us. The Moody Blues used to come in, and Pink Floyd came in. We had Pink Floyd's engineer on our album, and those guys had come in, and so there was so many influences by so many people. But we weren't really directly influenced by anyone.
Right. Okay.
We just absorbed everything.
Influenced by the environment, almost.
Yeah. Influenced by, exactly right, Neil. And we just absorbed everything and blended it into our own style.
Okay.
We didn't try to copy anybody else. We just saw everybody else and went, "Wow, this is all incredible," and then went away and did our own thing.
Yeah.
Based on the whole, because right at that time was when a new genre of music called prog rock, progressive rock, became, like with the Jethro Tulls and the Yeses and those sort of bands. Prog rock became the thing, and I suppose if you listen to Choice Cuts' album, it is a prog rock album.
Yeah.
So that was the influence. It was the general genre of music that was around, but nobody in particular. We didn't copy any particular band. We just developed our own brand of prog rock, I guess.
Well, I think it was Mike Rudd. May not have been. My turn to name drop now. You've been dropping. Yeah. And I think it was Mike who said prog rock really was any song that went longer than 3 minutes.
In a way, that's true. But it was a development, really. I mean, it was taking the 3-minute pop song and stretching it out, putting solos in, and I guess trying to display your musical prowess.
Yes.
And which hadn't been done in the 60s. In the 60s, it was a pop world.
Yes. And
now it became a rock world, So music changed. Around about the change of the decade, around about 1970 is when, Lobby Lloyd and Billy Thorpe back here were experimenting with heavier music.
Yep.
And that's what prog rock really was.
Yeah.
Just expanding your musical ability.
Well, at that time also, probably the two best-known songs from the Masters, Turn Up Your Radio and Because I Love You, were released.
They were.
And you were a co-writer on both of those?
Turn Up Your Radio was written before we went to England.
Okay.
That was our very last hit in Australia before we went to England. And we were sort of... what had happened with that was we were starting... There was that bubblegum era of music, that real pop stuff.
Yep.
And we were getting lumped in with that. And we knew we weren't that sort of lightweight sort of band. We knew we were a musically credible outfit, but we were getting lumped in with all this, the frilly shirt thing,
Yep.
And we thought, let's write a song that will forever allay any fears that we would be a pop band.
Yeah.
Let's write something that's so obnoxious and in your face and raw that nobody could call us a bubblegum band. So that's why we wrote Turn Up Your Radio.
Well, here's a piece of trivia just before you go on to talk about Because I Love You. This program, Radio Gaga, was named after a song, obviously.
Oh, yes.
Freddie didn't get that from me. I got it from him.
Of course.
And this show was almost going to be called Turn Up Your Radio.
Was it? Yeah.
And the one reason I didn't in the end was the program that preceded me when I started and subsequently precedes me. That makes sense.
Oh, yeah, whatever.
is a relatively quiet, and I didn't want to open the show with
You're too raucous. But that's what we wanted, something that was too raucous.
Yeah, well, it wasn't going to work for me, sadly, but otherwise I would have been down to you for a permission.
Yeah, but no, that's why we wrote it, just to allay any fears that we were a bubblegum band, and I think that worked because it's become a bit of a classic now, of course.
Absolutely.
In fact, there's Australia Post put out a postage stamp of it.
They did indeed.
So it did have some sort of impact.
Yeah, well, we're going to hear it right now. I'm going to ask you a question when we get back from this song, so I'll give you a moment to think about it. I'll give you 3 minutes and a few seconds to think about it. You've written and you've sung. If at the end of the day you had to choose, do you want to be remembered as a great songwriter or as a great singer? There you go. There's your question.
All right.
We'll come back after we hear Turn Up Your Radio, Masters and Apprentices. It is 94.1 FM, 3WBC. And there, of course, is the Masters Apprentices with Turn Up Your Radio. Very sage advice when you're listening to 94.1 FM, 3WBC.
Yes.
I'm with Jim Keays. That's that other voice. Jim is, of course, the man who is roaring out that advice to us and is sitting opposite me, and we're having a great chat here about life as a Masters Apprentice.
Well, I was very, very drunk when I recorded that song, and it's almost primal screaming in there.
It's getting very close to it, isn't it?
It is, and I was so drunk, and I'm not a big drinker, but that was the idea of going in there and recording something really obnoxious. I thought I better have a drink.
Be obnoxious.
So I had one or two drinks too many, and they had to actually hold me up to the microphone so I could sing. They were bracing me at the back so I wouldn't fall over, and I'm sort of standing up, hovering up there, screaming at the top of my voice. So that's how the song was recorded.
94.1 FM of 3WBC, of course, now condones drinking in moderation, of course.
Yes, of course. I don't even do it at all now. I'm like a monk. I don't do anything anymore.
Is that right? Oh, you sing pretty good.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. Now, I asked you the question before the song. Which would you rather be remembered as, a great singer or a great songwriter?
I think, in the end, I would say songwriter, I think. I mean, I love singing, and I've done it all my life, obviously. But a song will remain beyond that, you know. I mean, when I croak one day, my singing voice will then be gone. But those songs will live on. Well, hopefully they will.
Yeah.
Will live on. So I think it's more important to be a good songwriter than a singer in a way.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you can be a great singer, like say Farnham or something. But if you haven't written any songs, once you're gone, that's it, you know.
Well, the other thing too, I guess, if you take John Farnham, for example, and we're not wishing to bag him, but if you take him and take some of the Help, for example, which was a hit for him.
It was.
There was 4 blokes out of Liverpool who had a reasonable size hit with that.
Did they?
3 girls out of the US Banana Rama had a hit with it as well. What makes him special? Whereas if he's written it, which he clearly hadn't,
well then,
and I hear where you're coming from. So it's a good answer. Well done.
I think so. I think the songwriting is more important, and it earns you a few bob
as well
down the track.
Excellent. Yeah, that's even better, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in 1972, the band had got to a point where it was no more. Glenn had obviously decided management was where he was heading. Yep. And you guys split up.
We did. In England, we split up, and we'd sort of run out of money anyway in England, and we couldn't really work over there because we didn't have the wherewithal. We didn't have the equipment that you needed, especially in those days in England. We weren't equipped to work on a weekly basis in England. We didn't have PAs, trucks, road crews, management, all the infrastructure you needed. We didn't have that because we just arrived there with our guitars, and that was it, you know. So we really didn't have the wherewithal to make it in England. And so when the money ran out, and I'd been in there right from the start, the other guys came in halfway through our career, really.
Yeah, sure.
And I'd been in there from the very start. So when Glenn decided to leave, I thought, I've sort of had enough now myself.
Yep.
And I just got married and had a young son.
Who's also called James.
James, yeah. And so I decided I'll go back to Australia and just be a normal guy for a while.
Yep.
You know, give myself a rest.
Yeah.
Because it had been a hectic 8 years or whatever it was that we were on the road, and it takes its toll.
Yeah.
And I just thought I need a rest, and so I came back to Australia, and I was going to happily ever after in Adelaide, but that didn't last very long.
No.
I was there for maybe a year or 18 months.
Okay.
And then decided that I did want an ongoing career in music, so I reinvented myself.
So you've done a bit of journalism in Go Set and
I
the
did.
like.
When I went after the Master split and I came back and went to Adelaide and sort of settled down for a while, I actually inherited the Adelaide column of Go Set magazine.
Okay, yeah.
There was a column from each state.
Yep.
And what was going on in that state. So I started writing about the local scene in Adelaide and going out to gigs and watching bands and writing about them and all that sort of stuff. So that gained me a fair bit of experience in that sort of journalist area of things.
Yep.
Which was valuable for me.
Would have been hard being the Adelaide guy because they'd all gone to Melbourne.
That's right.
You'd be able to interview their parents.
That's right. So I did that for a while, and then I got a call from a woman in Melbourne saying, we'd like you to be in the rock opera Tommy.
Okay, yep.
Which was around 1973.
Yes.
And I said, yeah. So I went over and did that with Keith Moon from The Who and a whole bunch of Australian people, Billy Thorpe and Darryl Braithwaite and Ross Wilson. They were all in there. And so we did Tommy. One of the highlights of my career was doing Tommy. Yeah. I loved it. Okay. There was a huge orchestra. A guy came over, David Measham from London Philharmonic Orchestra, and a huge choir.
Serious production.
It was huge production, and just a brilliant thing to be part of, and that sort of gave me the yearning to be back in it again. You know, and I thought I've got to keep doing this. So I did, and so sold the house in Adelaide and moved back to Melbourne in about 74, and then started writing material for a new album.
And that's where the solo album Boy from the Stars came about.
Exactly. I decided to do something completely different.
And it was called a concept album too.
It was a concept album. It was. It was sort of like a rock opera,
okay.
I guess. Maybe I got it from the Tommy idea.
Maybe.
I don't know. I can't remember actually doing that, but maybe I did. And I think it probably was one of the very first concept albums in Australia at that stage. There wouldn't have been too many that I can think of any.
No.
Anyway, I did that, and I did it. It was so remotely different from Masters Apprentices, and that's what I wanted. I didn't want to do anything that was, just a solo version of the Masters Apprentices. Yeah. So that's why I did sort of those ethereal type songs and a concept and all that. So that was the idea behind Boy from the Stars. It was just a big step away from the Masters Apprentices.
Yeah, well, when I announced to the extraordinarily large fan base of Radio Gaga, I was talking to him the other day. Yeah. I was talking to a group.
They were both listening.
Yeah. I mean, hi, Mum, if you're listening, and Dad. But one of my listeners, Bill from Kilmore, said, "Oh, have you got Jim? Please, can we hear Boy from the Stars, the title track from the album?" Yeah. So we've tracked down a copy of that.
Oh, good.
Bill is listening. So Jim says, "Hi, Bill."
Hi, Bill. Yeah. I'm glad you like the song. I mean, like I say, it's very, very different from anything the Masters did, but I quite like Boy from the Stars.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, I thought it might have been a little bit sort of naff, but as the years have gone by, I seem to like it more.
Well, here's my confession. I was 11 at the time, and
I was only 4.
I didn't realise I'm taller than you are. That's probably why. But Bill said, don't really even know the song, so I tracked it down, and I thought I've heard this song before. It's one of those songs that sits in your subconscious somewhere.
Yeah.
And I've played it half a dozen times since I bought it the other day.
Right. Oh, good.
So, no, great. Really good. Well, we're not hearing the Master Apprentice this time. We're hearing Jim Keays with Boy from the Stars. You're listening to 94.1 FM, 3WBC. You're listening to 94.1 FM, 3WBC, Radio Gaga, and my guest in the studio is Jim Keays of the Masters Apprentices, and more recently of Cotton, Keays and Morris. I always stumble over those three names. I shouldn't. It's really easy to remember. And that was a piece of solo work you did, Boy from the Stars.
Yes, it was, and Boy from the Stars sort of. I guess it was a good thing in a way that it established me as something apart from the Masters Apprentices, not just another clone of them, and that's what I wanted. That was the objective of doing that album. But then I had various incarnations of the Jim Keays band after that.
Southern Cross?
Southern Cross was one of them. Several Jim Keays bands right through the 70s into the early 80s. And then I had another album, a solo album out in about 81 called Red on the Meter. And then I sort of gave it away for a while. I'd sort of really had enough of being on the road.
Yep.
And I decided just to come off the road and do something else. So I became a live DJ. I went and did DJ work in pubs for a while.
Okay.
And just to give myself a break, and it was fun to do. I had a really large vinyl collection, so I used to just go along and play some songs at gigs and stuff.
Yep.
And that was good. It earned me some money, and I could just be at home and do whatever I wanted, which was good. So through the early 80s, that's what I did. And then at the end of the 80s, a lot of things started to happen. I ended up going into the Hall of Fame, going on the postage stamp, and all those sort of things happened, and it changed my career again. You know, all of a sudden, from being a has-been, I became a legend.
Yeah,
I don't know how that works. But you're
not complaining about it.
I'm not whinging, but
No.
you know, like in the 80s, it was you were gone. You know,
Yeah.
I was if I tried to get a record deal, they'd laugh me out of the building.
If you didn't play guitar, you weren't there.
No, that's right. You know, I'd go to the record company with the latest demos, and they'd go, "Jim Keays, you're finished, mate. What
That's
are you
it,
doing?"
yeah.
You know, we want Snotty and the Nose Pickers, or whatever it was. You know,
Yeah.
and so the 80s were horrible for me like that because there was, you know, you were a has-been.
Yeah.
And then. Like I say, all of a sudden things changed. When we went to the Hall of Fame and the stamp and all that. People started to realise, oh, hang on, maybe he's not a has-been.
That's
you
right,
know? And so from has-been to legend overnight. You know?
Excellent work.
And and so then other things started to happen, and you know, I did several things, and then Russell asked me to join Cotton, Keays and Morris.
Yep.
Or Burns, Cotton and Morris as it was then.
Sure.
Because Ronnie had left. And I took a little bit of a while to make a decision on that. I didn't know whether that was the right move for me to do.
Yep.
But then I thought, you know, I can go out there and keep those songs alive, and as Russell was doing with his stuff, and so I thought, yeah, okay, I'll do it, and it's probably one of the best things I've ever done, really, because the people love it and it's fun to do. It's a fun gig.
Yeah,
we have a
absolutely.
lot of fun doing it because we're all mates from back in those days, and we have a good rapport on stage. We tell some funny yarns in between the songs that the people really like.
Yep.
And they love the songs, you know, that baby boomer audience that we've got that grew up with those songs.
And some who are younger than baby boomers.
And some that are younger than that
So pointing out very quickly.
who are embracing those songs, you know. And it's just such a fun thing to do. And I'm so glad I did it now. And I've been in there, well, I joined in 2000, so
Okay, wow.
10 years. So I've been in Cotton, Keays and Morris longer than I was in the Masters Apprentices.
Which is staggering.
Which is strange.
Yeah.
But it's just such a fun thing to do, and the audiences love it so much that it's hard to give it away. And the thing is that I would give it away if I thought I was just going through the motions with it and out there doing Turn Up Your Radio for the thousandth time, you know. And if I thought that was the case, I wouldn't do it anymore.
Sure.
Because not only would I be not satisfied, but the audience would pick up on it that you were
Absolutely,
just
no
going
question.
through the motions. And,
Yep.
you know, so, but that's not happening. We still love it. We still have fun with it. The crowd still love it. So, you know, while you're bringing happiness to people and reliving their youth
Sure.
for them, you know, and having fun ourselves, we're continuing to do it, you know.
Well, a mate of mine went and saw you at the shopping town 3 or 4 years ago, I reckon.
Yeah.
And he came home with a CD called One with the Lot.
Yep.
Now, for those who haven't seen that CD, it's by Cotton, Keays and Morris, but it's in fact the originals of songs that
songs that
you
we
guys
did, yeah.
were for video. So it's not the three of you singing them.
No.
There's one or two, I think, tracks on it where you guys...
We do, that's right.
Yeah, but fundamentally, it's a great way to get the greatest hits, in inverted commas, of the three of you. And I listened to it and I thought, this is a really good CD, but surely these blokes, So I took 2 or 3 years of being convinced. Russell came in and was in your chair one day, and I thought, look, I really should do the right thing. I'd get along. Russell's done the right thing and come in. I'll go. It is unquestionably one of the best value, best fun nights you can have standing up. It is just extraordinary.
Well, it is. And what we do is we sell the CDs, as you just said, at the gigs. And so what we do is after the gig finishes, we go out, and sign the autographs for them. And that's where you get the feedback from the people. They're in the queue there to buy the thing, and they talk to you, and the things they say, it's extraordinary. They love it so much that they feel like they're 18 again.
Yeah.
They all say the same things, and they say, you could have played for an extra hour. We love those songs. We grew up with those songs.
Yeah.
I had my first sexual experience in the back of a Holden Ute, to turn up your radio, and all that sort of thing. And they just love it, and they love the banter in between the songs just as much as they love the songs,
Yep.
And it's just such a fun night. Everybody says it, and people come up and they say, "This is the best show I've been to in years."
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we had a quick chat off air before about shows such as The X Factor and Australian Idol, and they play their role. I understand that. But the few times I've watched those shows, one of the things that comes through is the performers often look like they'd rather be somewhere else.
Yeah.
They look like they're incredibly nervous.
Well, they're not experienced.
Now, they're dreadful. And you three blokes, okay, you've been doing it a while, so you'd expect you to be reasonably good at it. The music's great. The execution of the music is great. You guys are having more fun than we are.
Yeah.
And it's just a great night out. And I don't know what the costs are, whether they vary across Australia, but I paid $50 or $55 at the shopping town, got a dinner and got 3 of Australia's greatest ever musicians singing for me for an hour and a half. Get better value than that.
Yeah.
It's just a great night out.
It is. And, what was I going to say? I've lost it now. I was going to say that it's just such a fun night that people just go away. I know they do because from what they tell us when we're signing the autographs, I know they go away absolutely thrilled with what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I think it was the 15th of October. I saw you guys at the shopping town.
Yep.
When I didn't only get an autograph, I harassed you into being on my show.
Yeah.
But I was ready to go again on the 13th of November.
Yep.
Now, if just about any group came out and said, "Oh, and by the way, we're coming back in 4 weeks. Do you want to come watch it again?" You go, I don't know.
I've seen it now.
But I was going back for a party.
Yeah.
It was just a great night out.
That's what I was going to say before. The other thing is, it's not cabaret either. We rock out.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not a wimpy band.
Oh, the girl from Ipanema is probably a bit undone.
Well, it might be, but no, like we use young guys in the band.
Absolutely.
And it pumps. It pumps it out.
No question at all.
Fully fledged rock band. That we're not like the Deltones or something.
Absolutely. Well, there's a group of people out there going, so where can I see them?
Yeah.
Now, of course, this audience beams internationally, Jim. It's going everywhere on the internet at WBC, 3wbc.org.au.
Yep.
But those of you who are in Victoria who are going, I've got to see these guys, where can I see them? On Friday the 10th of December, which is only 2 or 3 weeks away, you're at the Dandenong Workers Club with Russell and with Daryl.
We are.
And that will be guaranteed an absolute corker.
It will be.
And if you were to go to www.mastersapprentices.com,
yep,
there's no .au on the end of it, mastersapprentices.com, there is a link there to Cotton, Keays and Morris.
There is.
And you can see other dates for other parts of Australia.
Yeah, we're booked until the middle of next year already, sort of probably, I don't know how many bookings we've got for next year, but heaps of them.
Well,
we do a lot. We do 120 gigs a year. We work as much as anybody, I reckon.
Absolutely. Well, just looking down the list here, you were saying you're in Perth in January. New South Wales, various places in New South Wales, both in Sydney and 1 or 2 just out of Sydney in February.
Yep.
And in April, you've got one up at Asquith, Queensland in late March, and then you're back in Victoria in April, and a couple of those are down in Geelong. So there's plenty of opportunity to see you guys in one of your shows. So
yep,
get Molly Meldrum. do yourself a favour and get along to one of these things.
Yeah.
Jim, it has been an absolute thrill having you in here
Oh,
on
thanks,
Radio
Neil. It's
Gaga.
been a pleasure doing it. Really has.
An enormous amount of fun having guys like you come in. Thanks for coming along. We will make sure that we'll rush up and say, hi, Jim, I heard you on Radio Gaga if we're coming along to any of the gigs.
That's good.
And we're going to go out with probably the most well-known of your songs, thanks to Pure Milk or whoever it was in the late...
Well, it's been used so many times, probably 5 or 6 major national television campaigns with that song, and there's one at the moment for Australian Super, I think it is, which is good for the bank manager. we like that.
Yeah.
But no, it was recorded at Abbey Road, of course, where the Beatles recorded, and John Lennon was in the studio next door while we were recording it. So I always like to think that maybe a bit of his magic rubbed off onto our song. Who knows?
It could well be.
It has worked.
Well, here it is.
And it's lived on.
It has, absolutely. And it's not called Do What You Want to Do, Be What You Want to Be.
No.
Yeah. It is, in fact, called Because I Love You. You're listening to 94.1 FM. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Neil.
And we'll be back right after the Masters.